Welcome to, or welcome back to, the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and in this episode, I want to talk about some points that were brought up in the comments on the video I made about Fair Bluff and what might have happened the day Micah Francis died. I also want to touch on some more rumors that the Millers are killing machines, as well as talk about some updates to the channel. Let's start with the topics that were raised about the day that Micah Francis died. Airports. It was suggested that I check out private airstrips in the area, and there are multiple of them, so a plane could have been used. For example, and I'm just picking a city off the top of my head, it's a short 40 minutes from Charleston, South Carolina to the Lumber River area. But if we're thinking about Mark Hoffman being the pilot of a plane, he only had his student license then and wasn't allowed to carry passengers. Would he have risked possibly losing his license and never being able to fly again? He would have had to have something pretty important on the line to put himself out there like that. The number of people. There have been mentions that multiple people had to have been involved in Micah's death. My view is that the more people involved in any kind of crime, the more likely it's going to be that someone's going to blab about it. The same goes with any conspiracy. The more people involved, the less likely it is to be an actual conspiracy. For the most part, people have trouble keeping a secret, and even if they don't speak to law enforcement, they're sitting at the bar running their gob or confessing to their bed partner. Phone pings. I think there has been a misconception from early on, and that is that Micah's phone pinged at 1281 Princess Anne Road. I'm not convinced that was part of any ping. On the report that Robeson County provided, the phone pinged at the coordinates given, which is where the red marker is. The 1281 Princess Anne address shows as the subscriber address, and what does that mean? I'm not sure. I wasn't able to find a definitive answer on whether or not that is where the phone was located when the call was made, or whether it really is a subscriber address. Neither one makes sense in this case. Once people learned that Tommy Walters, one of the maintenance workers at the park, lived across the street from 1281 Princess Anne Road in Orem, they decided that he must have been the one who killed Micah. The only evidence they have is that he lived across the road from an address that showed up on the report, and he works at the park. That's not even circumstantial evidence based on the loosest of definitions. The thing is, remember how I told you that Princess Anne Road was also on the Columbus County side of the Lumber River? Well, there's a 1281 Princess Anne Road on that side too, in a town named Chadbourne that is just 6 miles from the river. Since the Rapid SOS doesn't show a town, just a street address, we can't be sure which it is. That might be why the dispatcher didn't think Micah was in Robeson County to begin with. And it's not unheard of for 911 calls to be routed to the wrong county. I haven't seen a single connection between Tommy Walters and John Paul Miller or Micah Francis or anyone associated with either of them. Yes, Tommy knows Charles McKinnon, but there's no proof that Charles is connected to Miller and Associates. And Tommy and Charles knowing each other might be because the population of Orem, North Carolina is 59. That's it. Just a 5 and a 9. There are no other numbers after that. Everyone in Orem should know everyone else in town. I just think it can be extremely dangerous to accuse someone of a murder without any provable evidence. What if there's a wackadoodle out there who is convinced he or she needs to avenge Micah's death? If they hear someone saying that they're positive the maintenance guy did it, who's to say that they won't believe it and seek their revenge? I know that probably sounds like a crazy thing for someone to do, but have you read the news lately? While I'm talking about this, let me say that when I bring up things like this, I am completely unaware if any other creator is the one who said that about Tommy. And that's because I have a dirty little secret. I don't typically watch other creators who are covering the same cases that I am. I have my reasons for not watching too. One is that I just want to be over here doing my own thing and not be influenced by what someone else is doing. I know there have been times when creators thought I was coming after them, and I promise you I wasn't. But I do get people messaging me to ask if information is correct or not. And people let me know if someone is saying something about me that isn't accurate. That's the only time I usually know what's going on in other creators' videos. So when I talk about these things, I'm not discussing a person, I'm discussing an idea. Micah going to work. People wonder why Micah was dressed for work and didn't go. We know it wouldn't be like her to just not show up, and she was obviously planning on working that day. The phone number for the restaurant she worked at could have been spoofed with a text message to tell her she didn't need to go in that day. Then she could have received another text message from someone to get her to go to North Carolina. Whatever happened, it was quick. And while she obviously hadn't planned to go to North Carolina that day, I think someone else had planned for her to. Bear Bluff. I was asked if I heard Micah say Bear Bluff in her 911 call instead of Fair Bluff. I don't hear anything other than Fair Bluff. Here's the clip from the call, and I've slowed it down so you can hear the F sound on the word fair.
Fair Bluff, Fair Bluff, Fair Bluff.
Micah's car. How did the deputies know that it was Micah's car when they ran the license plate? I think the car was registered to both Micah and her roommate, and that was probably so John Paul wouldn't be able to take it from her like he did her other car. And while we're on the subject of Micah and cars, what happened to the Honda CR-V that was in her name? It's still showing on her tax record, and John Paul even mentioned it in divorce papers he filed in February of 2024. Now, is this the one that John Paul had said that Micah had purchased for her father? If that was the case, why would it be in her name and where is it now? If John Paul actually thought Micah had bought the vehicle for her father, did he put that in the divorce papers as a way to just be petty and smarmy about it? I think it would break my heart if I thought that John Paul Miller had ever been petty about anything. The dispatcher. Some people have speculated that the dispatcher that took Micah's 911 call that day might be part of the plan because of how she acted on the call. Was that really because she was in on some plan, or just that she didn't do great on that call? I haven't seen any evidence of who she is or if she's connected to John Paul or Micah. I know it's easy to think that Robeson County was in on a plot, but that's just because they're not very good at their jobs. It's not a secret that if you want to murder someone and not have it investigated, Robeson County is a good place to do that. However, if they were in on it, I don't think they would have asked the FBI to step in and investigate. Micah's friend Charlotte. John Paul contacted Charlotte the day after Micah's death and said that he thought maybe Micah had been going to see her. Is it possible that Charlotte's phone number was spoofed as a way to lure Micah to North Carolina? Yes, it is possible. But if it was, I don't think it was presented as any kind of emergency, because Micah didn't seem rushed at all during her time at the pawn shop or at the gas station. Life insurance. I haven't heard any mention of there being an insurance policy on Micah. Some people have mentioned that life insurance doesn't cover suicides. It does, but you usually have to have the policy for 2 to 3 years before it will cover it. The ATV. I mentioned that an ATV could definitely get through the trails that are around the Lumber River State Park. That caused several of you to remember that John Paul has an ATV. Yes, he does, or he did. He was videoed a few days or so after Micah's death washing it in his yard. Then when he let his neighbor borrow it and ended up having the police called on him, he looked extremely nervous when that happened. Horry County ended up impounding the ATV, and I've wondered if that was at the behest of the FBI. A boat ride. People are still trying to say that Micah was taken to the park by a boat, and I am still saying it wouldn't have been possible. When I mentioned the property by Tom Winslow's that is owned by Mission for the Nations, I never said anything about a boat. I was just pointing out that the property was there. In fact, in the video I posted about Fair Bluff, I made a point of showing the math as to how a boat ride wouldn't have been feasible, and I also mentioned that it's much easier to move a person who is still alive. And now let's move on to yet another claim about a death being connected to John Paul Miller. I was asked the other day if I knew anything about Rasheem Carter's death being connected to Micah's death. This was first brought up last summer, but has recently resurfaced. For those who aren't aware of Rasheem's case, he went missing on October 2nd, 2022 in Taylorsville, Mississippi. His mother's told multiple news outlets that her son told her that he had been targeted by coworkers, and somehow people thought those coworkers might have actually been John Paul Miller and a couple of guys from Myrtle Beach. At the time, Rasheem was working at the Georgia Pacific plant in Taylorsville. From what I understand, there was a construction company working at the plant at the same time as Rasheem, and that construction company was named Hanko Construction. The connection between the two cases was supposed to be that this Hanko Construction was the one out of Myrtle Beach that is owned by Kirk Hanna, who was a friend of John Paul Miller's. I don't think it was the Hanko Construction from Myrtle Beach that was working at the Georgia Pacific plant back in 2022. I think it was the Hanko Construction from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. It's only 50 minutes away from Taylorsville, and it makes a lot more sense for it to be that Hanko than the one that's almost 12 hours away. Plus, the only Hanko that has a contractor's license in Mississippi is the Hattiesburg Hanko. And just to be clear, the two Hanko construction companies aren't related in any way other than having the same business name. Once again, there was a death that was supposedly connected to the Millers that wasn't. And I still haven't seen any proof of any of the deaths being mentioned as being connected to the Millers, except for the deaths of Chris Skinner and Micah Francis. As a content creator, I'm not going to say there's even a potential connection of any death to the Millers unless there's evidence that they knew the person and had a reason for them to be out of the way. If evidence does show up, I promise I'll talk about it. I want everyone to know how much I appreciate your support, but I'm going to have to change the memberships. I can't keep up with everything and still expand as I want to as a content creator. It's all I can do most of the time to get out what I do. I spend an extraordinary amount of time researching, and it's just me doing this by myself. And you only get to see a part of all the research I do. There's a lot of information I dig out, like a little meth squirrel, that I don't ever share because it ends up being a big fat dead end. I know things got messy with the memberships when I wasn't sure if I was even going to have a channel, so I have to give True Crime Re props for that. Good job, Sherry. Some of you switched your membership to Patreon during that time, and I prefer Patreon because they have better options for perks and because they don't take as much of a cut as YouTube does. YouTube takes 30%, and Patreon only takes 10 to 12%. I understand that some of you are more comfortable with YouTube, and that's perfectly okay too. I will keep memberships open on both platforms, and I'm going to keep the 3 levels, but the perks will be limited to George Fain and Nancy Drew levels, having access to the bonus material I have on my website, and the Nancy Drew level will get 10% off any merch order. I've also lowered the price of the Nancy Drew level. So thank you for all your support and for sticking by me while I've been trying to navigate the creator world. I am consistently astounded that so many of you want to sit around and listen to me blather on like I do. I'm going to try to start having more lives, but I'm not going to promise they'll be on any kind of regular basis right now. And thank you to everyone who has purchased my branded merchandise. I appreciate you all, and I absolutely love seeing the photos of you wearing or using your purchases. And in honor of using the word wackadoodle in this video, I've added a new design to the shop today, and it's available as a t-shirt or a coffee mug. I'll leave a link for the memberships and the merch shop in the description box. I have started covering other cases because that's what I originally started this channel to do, cover true crime. That doesn't mean I'm giving up on Micah's case. It just means that I'm only going to make videos on information that I think is pertinent to her case. I'm not going to fabricate content. I'm not going to dramatize the narrative. I'm not going to entertain conspiracies. And I'm not going to try and drag out information to get 4 videos out of it when 1 will do. Finally, as one of the ways I'm expanding as a creator, and I don't mean just the rapid expansion of my backside that's coming with age, I have started another channel, but it's one that won't take up much of my time at all and requires hardly any research. And it probably won't involve all the drama that I found in the true crime world. It's going to be an ASMR/relaxation channel that might morph into other topics, but for now, I'll be reading vintage stories and books, old enough to be out of copyright, so 1930 and prior for now. If you have any old books, stories, or poetry that you'd like for me to read, please let me know. I might even throw some of my piano playing on there. The channel name is simply Aunt Aggie. I have it published but don't have any content yet. And I think this will be a nice way for me to get a much needed break from true crime, but still be able to be a workaholic. So that's a win-win. I'll leave a link for it in the description box as well. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe as this helps my channel grow. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.